the struggle was understanding what this was and like differences between the SQUO. So it's not going to be good, Lily.
As long as you advocate something that's actually different from the SQUO.
No.
You're already better. That's already better than the team that I got.
I hope so.
Because they were arguing something that was not unique.
I actually argued.
So are we shortening the times for this?
Unless you don't have, do you have stuff?
Do you have stuff for 7 minutes?
I have 5 minutes. Well, because like I think 2 contentions are kind of developed, and 1 could use more work. But watch me.
Then let's do 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Or rather, an hour.
I mean, it's a new topic. Like once I get feedback, I'll understand what to do better, and I can debate this again better. Okay. So time starts now. As the first speaker of the affirmative team, I strongly affirm today's solution. The USFG should implement an annual tax on wealth. So just some brief background. The actor is the USFG. Time frame as soon as possible. Funding, no funding necessary. This is a tax plan. Going on to the plan text. So what this would encompass is a wealth tax is basically a tax on the net worth or the amount of assets that an individual has. So for individuals who have over $100,000 in net worth, they would be being taxed on the first other rate is 0.5%. And as we get to higher ranges, the tax rate would progressively increase at a slow but steady rate. So currently going on to the first contention is that of, yes. So wait, hold on a sec. Yeah, you can start.
So how would this be implemented legally? Like, what legal mechanisms would this be passing through, and what are the tax rates for each bracket specifically?
Okay, so we have something called fiat. So this is going to happen. There is no mechanism. Okay, the IRS, they handle the taxes. They're going to be the one. Yeah.
That wasn't really my question. I was asking, like, where would it go through? To Congress, Supreme Court, or...
There's fiat! I don't know, but fiat. It's going to happen. Legally, I guess Congress would have to, I don't know, but it's going to happen under fiat. No matter how long the process may be, fiat, it's going to happen. We're going to the first contention, which is that of income tax inefficiency. So currently in the SQUO, what we see here is that what we have is an income tax based on the amount of income an individual earns between each year. And according to the New York Times, the problem with the income tax, there are many loopholes, especially when it comes to individuals who have a really high income tax rate, which can assume that they have high net worth. Oftentimes, many individuals actually borrow against their own stocks, real estate, and scratch that. Okay, so oftentimes many individuals invest. They borrow against their stocks, real estate, and they don't have to pay tax under the SQUO. All they need is to sell assets and pay off debt. So what we see here is that if they even want it, passing it on, so especially there's a loophole when it comes to passing on money, because there's no tax on the assets, just on the income. So passing on, they can borrow against their will, then they can try to pass it on to, okay? Yeah, you know what, let's just go to the second contention, which I think is a lot clearer to understand. Okay. Inequality. So currently, according to the Washington Post, 1% of American households account for 22% of our country's wealth. What we see here is that there is this huge gap between the rich and the poor, where you have the rich being the huge bread makers of America. And this is a real huge problem, especially when the rich can afford to pay more taxes. So the wealth tax is a more progressive and a more efficient way to solve income inequality, because what we see here is rather than just taxing on the income, where wealthy people may not even, they may choose to hold on to their gains rather than investing. If a person who was wealthy chose to hold on to their gains rather than investing, then they wouldn't theoretically have that much tax placed on them, because they don't have an income yet, they have a lot of net worth. So what we see here is that having a wealth tax for individuals who choose not to spend their money or save it, we would actually be allowing for the government to collect money and using taxes, and the impact of this is having more money leads to more public spending programs, more money that the government could use on infrastructure, healthcare, which is overall increasing our quality of life. So my third contention is that of productivity. So according to the Boston Review, an annual wealth tax may induce individuals to transfer their assets from less productive investments to more productive ones. So like an example of this is, let's say the USA were to implement a tax on land. So for those individuals who may not be using their land, or they would actually be encouraged, they'd actually be encouraged to turn their idle land into productive lands that could yield crops. So in the same way, by taxing annual wealth, they could actually be, investors would use their money in more higher risk and more productive investments, which would overall be better for the economy, which the impact of that is a higher quality of life. Okay, yeah. That was shady, but I'm sorry, Lily, but like this is like I know like it's not good, but like I'll get better at this. I'll learn about this after you give me my feedback and tell me what I did wrong.
This is gonna be really bad.
Dude, it's okay, you can't get any worse than this.
We'll see about that. Okay, so it's gonna go spec, dissat, counterpart. I told you it was gonna get bad.
Hold on, I need some juice before we start. Okay, I can take this now.
Okay, is everyone ready?
I hope so. Okay.
Okay, time starts now. I strongly negate today's resolution that the USFG should implement an annual tax on wealth. Okay, so going into spec. So, interpretation. What AFT should have done was provide a clear plan detailing how they were going to be putting this plan into action and how the specific wealth taxes that they were going to be putting. They needed to give a clear, detailed plan. Violation, they did not do this. When questioned on how they would be implementing this legally, they just said it's going to happen without providing a mechanism. So, moreover, they did not respond to my question on specifically what numbers would be put for what wealth brackets. So, the standards, what this is okay. I don't know. I'm making this up. Okay, it's loss of education because unless there's a clear plan text, we can't stand up here and debate if we don't know what we're talking about, if we don't have something clear and definite to be holding up to when we're measuring our impacts. Instead, they just say, oh yeah, this is going to happen without giving any specifics as to how. We aren't debating on whether it will happen or not. I just asked how, and they haven't responded yet. So this is a clear lack of specificity. So this is a voters issue, Judge, because it impacts education in or around, because what happens now is that we can't have a fully educational debate because the AF failed to provide a clear plan text, which means it's harder for us to talk about definite impacts. Therefore, we can't learn about the effects of this plan. Okay. So I'm just going to assume that their plan text is that it's going to happen, the government's going to put it in right now. So going on to the disadvantage. Okay, so this dissad is going to be called constitutionality. So In the status quo, let's see, I have it here somewhere. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4 of the Constitution states that the federal government can't place direct taxes. Now, we do have this in the status quo in the form of income taxes, but this is because of the 16th Amendment, which bypasses this to place the income tax. Now, wealth taxes aren't included in the income tax, which means if we were to go through with this plan, what we would essentially be doing is we would be, yes?
So could you explain to me how what was it, B16 works? Like you said they bypassed it using the 16.
They just said that Congress can like put an income tax.
Yeah. That's the 16th Amendment.
Pretty much.
Okay.
So, okay, so since they claim that this plan will be put into action as soon as possible, we must assume, due to the lack of other specificity, that what they mean is that it's going to be done right now without any thought as to whether an amendment should be passed or not. So what we see is that this plan would be actively undermining the Constitution. Now, the impacts for this is, if someone sees that they can undermine the Constitution and get away with it, the Constitution no longer has credibility. What this means is that the rights and freedoms that we are guaranteed in our Constitution can be undermined as well, because this sets a precedent. What this would mean is we would see loss of life, dehumanization, and all of that bad stuff if people start undermining the Constitution and not not taking our rights and liberties guaranteed there for fact. Now, the counterplan. Okay, the counterplan is that we will be first passing a constitutional amendment stating that Congress can pass a wealth tax, and then we will be implementing the wealth tax. Now, this is obviously competitive because it's like a totally different action. You can't both put the wealth tax and then do like an amendment and then the wealth tax. So this is better because it has all the impacts of the affirmative, of reducing inequality and like boosting the economy, while not having the detriments of like undermining everything our country stands for. So, I negate.
Okay. So, right now, I'm going to address neg case and refute their one decide. Address why their counterplan does not stand. Then go over the AF team's contentions in which the neg failed to refute. Okay. Turn starts now. As the second speaker of the affirmative team, I strongly affirm today's resolution. The SFG should implement an annual tax on wealth. So the one dissad that the NEG team brought up was constitutionality. And they explained how we actually let's address their I forgot what it's called, but it was a theory thing. Argument. Okay. So they said we should be voting on they should be voting negative on lack of specificity. Okay, so first of all, what I did say was that we were going to be taxing individuals earning higher than $100,000 at a rate of 0.4%. Then, as income increases, the tax rate would progressively increase. Because I am not an investor, or I have never had any experience with the economy, don't expect me to provide any more specificity other than that. I did provide a base number. I did provide a base tax rate. I feel like this should be enough, Judge. But Judge, please don't just this should not be a priority, because we should be focusing on the debate and the topic at hand before theory arguments that do not show any real world impact or even contribute to the education of this debate. Yeah. So, okay. So, yeah, and their whole argument on like, So going on to the first decide, which is that of constitutionality, they explained how we need a constitutional amendment to do this action. Okay, so the fact that the USFG was able to have a constitutional amendment just to pass income tax probably means we shouldn't have that hard.
Are you aware that your plan text specifically stated that you would be doing this as soon as possible?
Yes. Now, can I talk? Okay. So, I don't know. Okay. So, the fact that the USFG was able to pass an amendment to do to pass income tax, what we need to understand here is that the Constitution, though it outlines the basis for our country, that is not the only reason why our country still exists today. Like, our rights are not just through the Constitution, they are through the many laws we have, and currently what we see here is that majority of Americans, whether or not it go beyond the constitutional amendments, wouldn't really matter, because what we see here is that the top 1% are earning 22% of the wealth, and this would be more beneficial to a majority of Americans. A majority of Americans would want this, so therefore they wouldn't even care if it's going past constitutionality. And the fact that this is the only argument that the Ned brings up clearly shows that we are winning this debate so far. Okay, so their counterplan was that of just first passing the amendment, so they won't have the detrimental effects of people thinking they can get away with violating the Constitution. And going on to how they're going to change the Constitution, then pass this tax. Okay, so we don't need to change the Constitution. The Constitution, though it is a very important historical document that does outline the basis of what our country believes in, we have many laws we can change. We can do this action, and a majority of Americans would be willing to support this, as this issue is really important to those who are earning less than $100,000, who currently make a majority of America. A majority of America would support this. And no, this does not mean that people would think they can get away with violating constitutional amendments just because a wealth tax is passed. It's a tax. It's a tax. Like, I don't know how I can emphasize this enough. Their counterplan literally, it's so permeable that, like, okay, but because she said, like, okay, so what we have to understand is, like, their counterplan isn't even competitive. It's literally just passing a amendment. They're doing the same exact plan, well, the AF is doing. And now I'm going to go on the AF contention, in which the neg failed to refute and drop completely, so you can extend all the impacts and all the links. Yeah, you can extend that across your flow, Judge, because the neg failed to refute that, and they should not be coming up in their second speech refuting that, because that'll just leave the voters for the AF to refute that, which is highly unfair. Okay, so the first was that of income tax and efficiency. So what we see here is that in this flow, what we have is an income tax on those individuals who are earning more than a certain percentage. What we need to understand is not all wealthy individuals are actually earning an income. Many are just saving them on offshore accounts or on banks here themselves. And what we see here is that the government, these people who can afford to pay so much more taxes, don't. And because of loopholes like these, what we see here is that a wealth tax is going to tax on the net worth. So the true amount that the individual has is being reflected in tax. Impact more taxes increases quality of life. So you can also extend the income inequality, and you can extend the productivity, how people are going to invest in more worthy investments if their whole assets are being taxed. And for all these reasons, I strongly affirm today's resolution. Okay.
Was that 15 seconds again?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Hold on, I need juice.
Okay, I'm gonna go AF, DivSat, counterplan, spec.
Wait, I need to get my pen. Oh, it's called a spec. I was wrong with that. Okay.
Yuri specs and
I guess there's C down the bottom. Okay.
oh, that's so weird. Isn't that supposed to be like... Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So time starts now. I strongly negate today's resolution that the USFG should implement an annual tax on wealth. Now, over AF case, yes, we will concede that they do have all these impacts and they do solve for this. However, keep in mind, Judge, that the neg also solves for this, so this is a wash for both sides. So moving on. Okay. Constitutionality dissent. So they claim that the USFG can pass an amendment saying that this could happen would be severance out of their advocacy. So since they claim that it is as soon as possible, we must assume that in their plan what would happen is that they would just be doing this without regard to the Constitution or to the amendment process, as that can take a long time. So They claim that most Americans don't care about the Constitution, so it's okay we bypass it now, and they claim that our rights are not in the Constitution. Keep in mind, Judge, that the Constitution is the supreme law of our land. The Constitution is the living document that has guaranteed our freedom from, like, 1783, 89, whatever, to today.
1774, like the Revolution of 1774.
Okay, whatever. I didn't give you the right to talk. Okay.
Ouch.
So, even if most Americans don't care about the Constitution, the super Tea Party people, they will care, and they will be, like, super pissed off. So what they will do is they'll double their resistance to other measures that could actually do good, which would result in decreased quality of life. Now, they claim that going past the Constitution is okay, and that doing it once won't trigger, like, a massive collapse. Now, as we've said before, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It is the only thing that is keeping us away from dictatorships or other forms of tyranny because of the freedoms that have been listed there physically in the Constitution. If we were to go past that, the supreme law of the land, what does this state for our country? It pretty much means we're in a free-for-all. And literally bypassing the... I'll take your question later by 10. Thank you very much. Okay. And they claim that most Americans don't care about the Constitution, therefore it's okay to go through with this. What they're advocating here is a kind of mob rule mentality, which means that they pretty much don't care about the law. They're just going to go with it because that's what people think we should be doing. What this means is that the majority can turn on oppressed minorities, which leads to more dehumanization. And we see that this can result in more racism. It could even lead to genocide. Now, we see an example of this in my favorite president ever, Andrew Jackson, okay, who pretty much, like, bypassed Supreme Court, Senate, like, the entire government to remove the Indians from their native land on the Trail of Tears, which was, like, pretty much genocide. And later by the time, thank you. The AFT plan sets a precedent for a terrible action like this if we were to go through with their plan. So now, for the counterplan, they claim that most Americans support, therefore we could still do this. They claim that this isn't competitive, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. We are taking different actions. We are upholding the Constitution. They are undermining it. As we've stated before, what they're going for with this argument is mob mentality, which, as we've stated, is bad. It leads to dehumanization. It can lead to things like racism. It can lead to genocide. It can lead to people later by time acting irrationally without any thought for what we should be doing. So now I'm going to go to spec. Okay. So they claim that they have followed the interpretation by saying that they were 0.5% on 100,000 and above and whatever, but they still have failed to answer my question on how this would be legally implemented. So there is still uncertainty on how this would be happening. So the spec shell still stands. Since they failed to provide a way that this would be happening through Congress or Supreme Court or whatever, this means that there's less specificity, therefore less education. Now, they claim that they have no experience, therefore you can't expect them to know about these things. However, this is an argument that just bars education, saying, I don't know, let's not talk about this. So what we're doing here is we're just saying, we're just keeping ourselves in a sheltered situation without seeking to learn more. So what we see that the app is repeatedly shunning the idea of education, while Neg is embracing it, and
I have another 3 minutes.
Oh yeah, it's me. Okay.
I don't think I'm gonna have to flow this. No, seriously, like, I'll just listen for POIs.
Okay, I'm just gonna go all over the place. I don't have something. Okay. Time starts now.
Okay.
In this speech, I'll be going over reasons why the NEG has clearly won today's debate. So, first voter issue, the spec shell. So what we see here is that AF has repeatedly sought to take education out of today's round. They have provided an unspecific plan. They have claimed that they have no experience, therefore they shouldn't be expected to know about these things. What they're doing is that they want to keep our debate round to what we know rather than seeking to talk about what we don't know and therefore learn more. Moreover, their lack of a clear plan text means that it is harder for us to debate impacts in today's round. So what we see is that AF is hurting education. And this is a very important issue, Judge, because this means that we don't go out of this room learning more, and this has to be evaluated first before case. So second voting issue is going to be constitutionality. They claim that we can just bypass the Constitution. The Constitution is what separates us from other countries. The Constitution is the supreme law of our land. And they just say, oh yeah, we're just gonna do it anyway because people want to, right? No, not right. This is mob rule, okay? Mob rule is bad. It means that like 10 people can get together and be like, let's hang that guy. Yeah, that sounds cool. Let's do it, okay? So what we see is that we go through this AF plan, it sets a precedent for undermining the Constitution because of what people want. They set a precedent for mob rule. They set a precedent for oppression of minority groups, for racism, for genocide, and these are all impacts that outweigh any potential economic impacts of their plan. Moreover, yeah, a bit more impact weighing. What we see is that both the AF world and the neg world solve for these economic problems. However, what we see in the AF world is that the Constitution no longer has authority because people can just bypass it. We see mob rule form where people go after oppressed minorities. They go after people they don't agree with. They go after LGBT people. They go after people of color. Pretty much anyone who disagrees with them, because that's what the majority of people want. So, and this is degrading, dehumanizing, oppressive. What we see in the neg world is that our Constitution stands while we still have this economic benefit. We still have rights and freedoms that would be lost if we were to go through the AF plan.
All right, roadmap. It's going to be a discussion about fiat, what fiat is. We're going to go into why the neg pretty much has no case and why the half is winning. All right, so time starts now. So just in case the judges don't know, I'm going to reiterate what fiat is. So in debate, we have this mechanism called fiat. And fiat is used to bypass legislative and lengthy procedures, so we can be allowed to talk about the real issue at hand. For example, if we were to take a topic of should President Obama send troops to Syria, although Congress will first have to ratify it and there'd have to be many lengthy procedures to go over whether troops can actually be sent there, whether it's constitutional, for example. Under fiat, we can talk about this issue and we can bypass all these procedures so we can talk about the real issue at hand. So what we need to understand, Judge, is that the argument about constitutionality really does not stand, because what we see here is that with the mechanism of fiat, this is going to happen. We are going to be able to do this. And, yeah, so therefore, we're going to go on. Okay, so their argument was that of how we didn't specify this. And might I point out that the neg team's counterplan is pretty much the same thing as the AF, including passing a constitutional amendment. So if ours isn't clear, theirs is certainly not clear too. So this is just a wash. No.
Point of order. The idea that our counterplan is as unspecific as your plan is entirely new information.
I just said it, so whatever. So going on to constitutionality. Their whole argument was how we're going to see mob mentality, people being oppressed. Okay, let's look at this minority. This minority is the rich, who control 22% of the nation's wealth. They may be a small group, but they are a very powerful group. They're just 1%, but they control 22%. just wrap your mind about these numbers. They aren't going to be oppressed. They're rich. And for their whole racism contention, okay, so most of the people in this top 1% is actually Caucasians. Sorry, top 1% is actually Caucasians, and this is actually the people who are, most of them, just saying. So what we see here, their whole impact about, like, minorities and mob mentality, no, because their so-called minority is the very rich and powerful who control most of the wealth. Yeah, going on. So let's go on. So because the Ned Team's counterplan is just passing an amendment, no. Literally, they have no plan. Their only difference is passing an amendment, and as we can clearly see, that passing an amendment is not necessary. And what we can see here is that no, we're not undermining the supreme law of our land. We have plenty of other laws outside the Constitution. All the impacts that the app has mentioned still stand, and the Neg has no case. And for that, please vote app. I know. Top white percent.
Yeah.
I meant to say top 1%, but I came out wrong. Because after that, I was going to say most of these people are Caucasian, right? But then, that kind of, yeah.
Okay.
I'll learn more about this topic, I promise.
Where should we start?
I'm sorry, but
That is a very good question.
are we better than diversity?
I mean, you're advocating for something that's
on
actually...
topic.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Why are you on the ground?
The wind.
Okay. Let's start with app speech. First of all, actually either A, have the numbers and percentages as they go up, or say at what rate they are increasing, and at what income they will stop increasing.
Okay.
Is it just going to be 0.5% for every $100,000? That's a really high tax.
Well, actually, they're advocating, a lot of, I was reading articles to say, Europe, they do, 80% or something, and those are cheap and fine, so.
Wait.
Okay.
80%?
So, our taxes
How is
are
that?
actually relatively low
Yeah, I
compared to the
know.
rest of the world. But maybe I read that wrong. Something about, one guy was advocating for 80%, but, that's just...
It's like their entire net.
Yeah. But yeah, have the actual numbers. That part of the
Right.
spec was definitely very relevant. Let's see. Also explain what the tax on wealth will be. So you want to be talking about when you're taxing wealth, that means you're taxing them holding money in stocks, in real estate, in artwork, in other types of property, in according to the source we used, in yachts. I didn't know that was a major
Private
source of
plane.
income. Private planes.
Swiss bank
Yeah,
accounts.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. So the team that I judged, they also said that this would also take into account any debt that people have. So it would be their total worth
But,
minus
so,
their debt.
So if I said net, even though I said net worth, I should specify that exactly.
Right. What
Okay.
does that? What does net worth mean?
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And you need to clarify in your context what that's going to include. Let's see. We got a criteria.
Yeah, I know. I realized that in her second
Really
speech.
very
July
relevant.
into my voting
No.
speech at wait, there's a
When she got over her second speech, the print, and then she talked about weighing the rod, and I'm like, oh boy, I forgot how to say criteria. And I'm like, I'm not gonna bring that up now because
Yeah. Also, when they ask you how you're passing it, just say Congress. Whatever. Or you can okay. I'll talk about that later. But there's arguments you can make against the constitutionality thing. Let's see. Try to avoid saying "squo" too much on lay because they will have no idea what that means.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. Explain more of why the income tax is ineffective. You need to be able to explain it enough so that we actually understand it. So the idea there is the income tax only taxes it when you actually earn an income. That means when you're going to a job, getting a paycheck, getting that paycheck either deposited straight into the bank or however it is, right? That is what an income tax is on. The wealthy get most of their money not from a job. Many wealthy people, maybe they work a job, maybe they don't. But they're getting most of their money from investments, from stocks, from their property, all of that. So when you tax just their income, they are paying a lot lower taxes, like even in pure amount of money, than people who are making maybe $250,000 a year. Like, serious disparity of taxes being paid because they aren't earning a huge income. They just have a load of money. Yeah? So you need to explain that more completely and how like you're solving for that, because you're actually taxing all of the money they have instead of just the income they're making, which is an insignificant portion of that. Explain the loopholes better. The one about like inheritance is definitely true. The idea is like when you pass on your estate after you've died, like even if they sell everything and make a lot of profit off of it, they don't pay any taxes on any of that. Which means you literally accumulate wealth every generation, and the government doesn't get a lick of it because it's not an income, even though you're making profit off of it, right? Like it's the same situation as what a capital gains tax would be, just with property instead of stocks, but it's not taxed, and capital gains are. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, you had some like sentence you were reading about like selling assets and paying off debt, and you didn't explain it. I didn't really know what you're talking
I
about.
don't understand it. I mean, like I was reading the thing about inheritance.
Yeah.
And I didn't really get it, but I'm like, I
Do
know.
you get it now?
Yeah, I get it a lot better now. Like, they just
So, like,
pass it
explain
on.
that
but
and
it's
say
not
more
income.
than just like passing on, because like I knew it because I ran this case. But like if you just say passing on, people are gonna be like, what?
Oh yeah. So when the
Passing
person dies,
Are they die? Is that
they give their property
It's just not
to their heirs, who are this not considered an income. So they don't.
So
get
even if
taxed
they
on
sell
this.
all of the assets,
Yeah.
so all the house, all the artwork, everything, and make a huge profit,
They don't.
they don't pay anything. Yeah?
Yeah.
You also need to explain why that's important. Like why is it good to close these loopholes?
Okay,
in
so-
the income tax?
Yeah. So would we just be explaining how now they're actually going to be paying taxes that reflect the amount of wealth they have, which is more fair to everyone.
Yeah,
When we
more
talk about
equitable
increased
taxes.
quality of life.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Second point on inequality. Yeah, don't call the rich the bread makers.
Yeah, that was really like, yeah.
A, they definitely don't make bread. B, they're not helping anyone else.
Yeah.
I don't think that works. Let's see. It seemed kind of similar to your first points. Like,
Yeah.
what you want to do is you want to focus on, like, say, like, have as maybe an impact to one, like, oh, it'll improve government spending, or have that be your separate point, and then talk about the other idea as the impact of the other one. So like, the idea is like, yes, you're closing inequality just by pure fact that the rich are paying more taxes, but B, you could be talking about like the first thing that's cut when government spending is cut are welfare programs. Like we prioritize defense, we prioritize military. They get money virtually no matter what. Social Security gets cut, healthcare gets cut, food stamps get cut, etc. Yeah. So those are the things that get cut first. So you're talking by adding this much more money back in, and you might want some sort of number of how much money that's going to be. This would be kind of a lot. Yeah. Most estimates are that it could easily double the amount of tax revenue the U.S. government currently gets, which would mean we have double as much money to use for stuff. Yeah, and you can talk about the impacts of that as well. You also want to talk about how income inequality makes it virtually impossible to have sustained economic growth. Because the problem is, like, you can have the economy growing and doing really well, lots of investments and so forth, and supply will be going sky high, factories are working well, etc., etc. That fails because there's no demand. And there's no demand if there's income inequality because people at the bottom don't have the money to buy the products. So even if you're making them and doing really, really well, your economy's not going to go anywhere unless there's people to buy them. Which means when you have a more equitable income system and like less of a wealth gap, you can actually have economic growth. Yeah. Otherwise, there will be speculation and crashes and the economy bursting, going in bubble, and life is sad.
2008.
Yes, and 1999 on my birthday. Stock market crash was on my birthday. Ooh. Okay. On productivity, A, do it in time. That 15-second grace period, though.
That was sketchy.
Yeah, try to avoid using your grace period. Like, you should be finishing your sentence in the grace period.
See, I was working through getting through the parts I didn't understand, so by the time I actually understood productivity and was ready to say it, time ended.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you were going with like, the land thing. The idea that it'll encourage investment is kind of true because, like, okay, so right now, without a wealth tax, it is very beneficial to them to just leave their money in, say, a piece of real estate or, I don't know, artwork. Something super expensive, but they're not risking anything, they're not paying taxes on anything, etc. Yeah? But when you're paying taxes on that, and when you're paying taxes on any wealth, that incentivizes them to actually use it and not look like they have the wealth themselves, which means they're more likely to finance things like startups, innovation, etc., things that are riskier, but which means they're not like holding that wealth for themselves. Yeah, so it looks like it's no longer their wealth when it's under
another company,
which theoretically would slightly reduce tax returns for the government,
but
at
it
the
would
same
still
time,
be more.
innovation, startups, etc. is good.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, where you were going with that. Like the idea that they'll actually invest the money.
Yeah.
Productively.
That's what I was trying to say about more
Yeah, I'm not sure
investment.
the land is.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
that
give me an
kinda confused me
example.
a
Like,
little
if you have land just lying around, but you start taxing it, someone might actually want to grow stuff there.
The rich aren't going to start having fun
Yeah.
on their land.
Right.
They're going to keep their fancy plants and grass and so forth.
No,
They
they're
might
fake
sell it.
artificial turf.
I mean, they might sell the land to
Yeah.
some company, maybe.
Yeah. Or could we argue that, okay, so even if the money is going into investments, which means they don't have to pay taxes on it, these startups are going to be paying their own taxes, and it's overall going to balance out.
Well, it would still be an increased amount, not everything.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see, on net. First of all, wool. Nice. And that, yeah. Spec, yeah.
Yeah.
You definitely, I would say, focus on the not having the numbers of how much the tax is going to be. Because, like, you can go for, like, the implementation, but that's where the fiat argument comes in. If you extended that they didn't have numbers, like she said, oh, like, we're just going to increase progressively, and you, like, just left it at that. If you'd extended it, that could have still been a voter issue for you, because it is important to know how much it tax, because there's a huge difference in the impact we're talking about with, like, an 80% tax and then, like, a 5% tax. Like, there's a huge difference in that. Also, it could not be 80, because we're talking 80% of their wealth taken away every single year,
That's what
and soon they would have no money. Yeah. So I would definitely focus on how they don't have specific brackets and don't explain the brackets even when you asked in a question.
And you also need to talk about why that's problematic for you.
Yeah. So not just like the loss of education, we're talking about loss of clash,
Right.
loss of ground, because a lot of disads that could specifically be based on how much the tax was is taken away. Any counterplans based on how much the
Right.
tax was is taken away. All of that, et cetera, is gone, as well as if you specifically prepped for like having ideas and now suddenly you're just like, whoa, there's going to be a tax that's some amount, et cetera. Vagueness and lack of clarity is,
So they call it articulated abuse. So you have to like explain like where the like how the violation like actually affected your ability to debate in the round.
like not just arbitrary.
Good question. Like, what would you suggest it as numbers? Like,
What's your plan?
Our plan was 1% after $500,000, 2% after $1 million. After $1 million. Then 3% after $3 million.
and then just
Even
3%.
For anything higher.
Yeah, so 3% is the amount.
But see, that's a lot of money because like
Yeah,
3%
it's a
of like what was it, 5 million or whatever.
It's a lot.
That's
Yeah.
a couple hundred thousand.
It's
Yeah.
a lot of money. Yeah. So that's what we ran as like progressive.
Yeah, we can just. Yeah, okay.
Also, you probably don't want to start it at 100,000 because that's
I
not
feel like
very high.
Yeah.
income.
I
That's
feel-
like lower middle class.
That yeah.
Like way lower. Like you don't want to start
I
taxing
feel like
that
the
much.
source or the guy who was talking about his plan is very like. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to start it higher because like the dissent our opponents tried to come up with was that it hurts people who don't work consistently but still have higher net worth, such as contractors. They're not consistently working because they work like contract by contract, so they don't have like a day job. But they often have higher net worth, like in like 500,000, 750,000, which means they're arguing like, oh, it'll be an unfair burden on them, et cetera, which isn't a very good argument when you're talking like 750,000. You're doing pretty darn okay, but like at the point where like for them, for you guys, they could have argued, oh, like people earning 100,000, which is
So then
a
yeah.
significant burden.
So that hurts the middle class.
Which you don't want to do. You want to be
Okay.
taxing the top 1%.
Okay.
Yeah, back to spend. Mention education and fairness, and
Yeah.
say a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. On the dissad of constitutionality.
So is this true?
Yes, it is true. We
Okay.
came up with it, but we kind of ignored it. And then they didn't run it, so we're like, whatever. Yeah, it is true, because we did need an amendment to the income tax, 16th Amendment, house thing. What about the English? Woo! You need to argue more of how it'll end up being a problem. Like, you did a fairly good job, especially later in the debate, about how undermining the Constitution will lead to, like, Tea Party backlash. And, like, that, I would say that's a stronger link than saying it sets a precedent for going against the Constitution. Like, the idea, like, they're not a fan when Obama tries to do executive actions. They're going to hate this, right? Especially since it's on the rich, which means the Republicans won't like it, which means Tea Party backlash. And then you can, like, turn it into a political dissad.
Yeah.
With, like, some bill that was going to pass and now isn't because Republicans are pissed off at Obama.
Or are you like this makes the Republicans come out and vote for like Marco Rubio or whoever, and then they
Yeah,
and then we have a
Trump.
Republican president, etc. You could also bring up how when it's unconstitutional, that likely means there's going to be a case challenging it, which
Right.
likely means the Supreme Court is going to overturn it, which means we don't even have a tax anymore. So
Right.
it doesn't even happen. Yeah, and then you just like went to all that trouble to implement an annual tax on wealth, and then it just goes away. And yeah. So you want to argue like both lines of those? So you have an idea of how like they won't even have their impact. So it doesn't even have to be a wash. It just won't happen in their world. If you really want to do a CP, like I guess this works, though she's right that there isn't really a competition. You should have
Right.
permed it. Like you just said it was permeable, but you never actually
Right, I
permed
know.
Yeah.
it. You can't just say it's
That's what I was
permeable.
trying to figure out. I was like,
You have to actually say, thus we're perming, which means you can do both at the same time. The perm is X. And then you'd say, do the counter plan, so pass the amendment first, then do the plan. Right?
Or you could do what I see in a lot of critique debates. Just make perm do the counter plan. Since the counter plan takes the affirmative,
Yeah.
doing the counter plan does the F.
Yeah, I was thinking like because that was like
Right.
in my head. I'm like, okay, she's using my time. Like I should be able to do both, like attachment, but like the whole
Yeah.
order thing skewed me off. But
Just say do both. Or just
Yeah.
do the CP.
I have a question. How do you refute constitutionality?
Do you have answers for it?
I said
A,
that in
you
one
could
way,
say
like,
as soon as
taxes.
possible implies that we've eliminated all legal barriers. Literally. Yeah? Like, we're not here to talk about whether the policy is constitutional. We're talking about whether it's a good idea or not. When you say in your plan text as soon as possible, and you should have said normal means, which would have given you even more room
Yeah.
to argue this. If you said normal ways and means instead of just like saying no funding as soon as possible, say as soon as possible normal ways and means, that implies that there are no longer any legal barriers because the U.S. government wouldn't pass an unconstitutional policy.
Okay.
Supposedly.
Yeah. Andrew Jackson is an exception to that rule.
Yeah.
I need to see Bloody Andrew Jackson for drama.
Right. Nice. Yeah, but you want to say that. You can say that we go against the Constitution all the time. Does anything happen? Nah, not really. Like, we're not going against the Bill of Rights by doing this. We're going against some archaic tax law that no one cares about.
Yeah. What was it? Article whatever. You actually cited the like paragraph.
Yeah, like, no one even knows that, honestly.
Right.
Like, no one would know. They could also probably try to include it under the income tax amendment. I'm not sure that would work, but they could potentially try.
Yeah, couldn't we say like, oh, if you could do this for income tax, there's no reason why we can't do this?
Well, if it's not your plan to have the amendment, then you can't assume it'll happen
You know
unless
what?
you're saying,
I
like,
feel like
as soon as possible, normal means you're saying, well, obviously they wouldn't do it until it was legal, so we've already passed this amendment and already
we
dealt
ever
with all
get
the
this
legal
argument,
barriers.
we're gonna pass the amendment in our plan text, so the NEC can't run this. Or maybe I'll let them run this and make them look like them.
You could also just have run flat-out disads to a tax on wealth. And then you can bring up A, constitutionality if you feel like it, and we have all the links for that. Talk about B, capital flight. Like, the rich will just leave the U.S. because they don't feel like paying up to 80% of their income to
But
the
Europe,
U.S. government.
But Europe already has all these wealth taxes.
Yes, not all countries have taxes like this. They could go to Canada.
Or they'll just like hide their money like in the Cayman
They'll
Islands.
just hide their money in offshore banking accounts. Like they won't. You can't guarantee you'll get any of this funding. You just need to have proof that they'll actually leave. Because the team that went against us literally just went for capital flight, essentially. They had like one other argument maybe, but like we were just like they're not gonna leave. There's infrastructure here. There's businesses here. It's a freaking 3% tax. They're not going anywhere.
In some instances, capital flight is kind of not unique. People are already hiding their money
happen
in like
either
foreign
way.
accounts.
Either way, we'll still get more money.
Yeah.
You can also, the other thing they ran was that this double taxes capital gains because there's already a capital gains tax, and now it counts as part of their wealth when they hold the stocks, and then when they sell it, so they're taxed on that, and then they're taxed on the profit they make. At like, it's double taxation of capital gains. So capital gains are when you sell a stock and make a profit.
Yeah.
So if you bought it for $100, sold it for $200, the profit would be $100. You pay a tax on the $100. Yeah. There's short-term capital gains tax rates, which are if you sell it usually within a year, and then there's long-term capital gains tax rates, which are lower. Encourage you to hold investments longer.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't pay as much as that. Short-term is the same as income tax, like 35% or something, up to 35%. Long-term is like up to 20 or something. Yeah, but the idea is when you're taxed on wealth, you're taxed when you hold those stocks, and you're taxed when you have the profit money. So you're taxing both those; they're part of your wealth and your net worth.
Oh.
But you're still paying the capital gains tax when you sell it on that profit margin.
Oh, then it's
So you're paying an intense amount of taxes on the stocks and on those capital
And
gains.
would a part of the plan could we scrap income tax and do wealth tax instead?
That's kind of extra tea, but you could.
Yeah, because I think the
Like,
topic only lets you make an annual tax.
yeah, like you could try, but it would definitely be extra topical. And if they knew how to run that, they would have room for that. Yeah. Let's see. Sahithi, don't concede that they solve. Wait, no, I skipped your speech. Okay, back to Christie. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, you need to have numbers for your plan in the first place, like how fast they're progressing, for you to be able to effectively defend yourself against that. Like, yeah, you want to bring up like, oh, yeah, the baseline is fine, whatever. Bring up fiat there too. Doesn't matter how it's passing through Congress, etc. Refute the standards so you have ground to say it's not a priority. Say no, there's no loss of education here. We're actually talking about the topic instead of like how Congress works and how taxes pass, which is really boring and no one cares about. Let's see. You do need to refute Constitution a little more, as we were talking about earlier. Yeah, definitely permit. It's so permeable. And then you're arguing that you just get all the benefits and it doesn't matter. Yeah. Also try not to copy paste.
Yeah, I actually realized that, so I put it down. I put it down at one point.
It's good. It's good. Okay. Sahithi, don't concede that they solve for it. Just say they don't solve for it. Like, have the thing in your initial speech that it won't even be implemented because the Supreme Court will rule unconstitutional. And then that's not even a wash. Then the AF case has nothing, and you just have all of it.
And then you argue counterclaim is the only way to solve.
Yeah. And then it's not even just, like, dependent on, like, the whole backlash thing from Constitution. Then it's dependent on, like, do we actually want this? AF already said they did. It's the only way to do it.
Right.
Yeah. On spec, go for the numbers again.
Okay.
Like, you need to go for it, because that's the stronger part of the spec shell. The idea of, like, Congress versus Supreme Court is not quite as strong. Yeah, there's no Supreme Court case. I don't think that'd work. Like, you need to, like, they can't just make arbitrary rulings. It has to be on a case. So, I guess if you'd had a case where, I don't think that works for taxes. But, yeah, just go for the idea of numbers.
They're taxes.
Yeah. And how that decreases education, clash, ground, etc. Let's see. I would say you said something about how it would be severance to, like, do an amendment to. It's not really severance because they still have all of the AF plan. It would more be just extra topical because it's not within the grounds of the resolution. So I'd go for that instead. Go harder for the Tea Party thing because that's strong. And the whole, like, Supreme Court would overturn it case, etc. I would say in cases like this where it's a little less clear whether they actually permed it or just said it was permable, I would refute it anyways and say, it didn't really seem like they actually said a perm. But on the off chance they try to go for a perm in a later speech, that's not possible because, yeah. Andrew Jackson was a fun example. Also so true. Andrew Jackson is an interesting person. Let's see. In general,
Can I borrow your charger for 10 minutes? I'm at 0%.
yeah. So plug it.
Thank you.
What, are you in the LD room? Or the
Yeah, I'm in the LD room.
Okay.
I'll bring it back.
Okay. In general, when you go for this kind of case, you probably don't want to go for everything in the last speech, right? Like, you don't necessarily need to go for every last thing. Like, you probably could have dropped spec at that point and been like, whatever, who cares? Like, you don't really need it, and then you could have gone harder on the CP.
Or you could have gone just on spec.
You could go one of two. Yeah. Or you could go, no, you don't want to do just the DA. You want to do either DA and CP together or spec.
Or just spec.
I would have gone probably for DA and CP if you had had in the initial speech that the Supreme Court thing, like, it'll be overturned and it won't happen, because then you're the only one with any chance of
Right.
Let's see. Christie, saying fiat doesn't solve for the fact that you didn't have numbers. That just solves for the whole legal implementation part.
Yeah, so just from the very beginning, swap the numbers. And
Also, for your example of sending troops to Syria, he can, under the War Powers Act, you can set them
Okay.
send troops to
you know
foreign
what,
nations
Lily?
and
I don't
keep
know.
them without telling Congress for like 60 days.
You know this. I don't.
But now you know. The president can send
What's it
troops.
called?
War Powers.
So he can send troops without telling Congress for up to 60 days.
I think it's 60, right? Before he has to inform Congress.
Yeah, and then if he wants to keep them longer, Congress has to, like, authorize it or something.
That's such a joke. Congress hasn't officially authorized a war in ages, and we've had plenty of them. That doesn't, yeah. It's a little sketch, but yeah.
I forget what it is, but there needs to be some, like, congressional
Yeah,
approval
there's
or
some
something.
sort of, yeah, definitely. Okay, you're talking about how, like, minority are rich and, like, it wouldn't hurt, but, like, the constitutional argument was that, like, it created a precedent of going against the Constitution, which means going against the Bill of Rights, which is definitely distinct. Random tax article versus Bill of Rights. Like, yeah, nah. But you want to bring up, like when you're arguing, oh, they'll be fine, they're the rich, she's arguing that this will go against protections for other minority groups, which is bad. So you need to be refuting, like, it's literally a tax article. Basically. Also, lol, talk, white percent. That was pretty great. This is actually kind of, it's so accurate.
They're not the ones being oppressed. Okay. So this was actually a good round to do. You might see a similar topic at SU. There's probably going to be some econ